the state owners also. The state owners, sometimes it's so skewed. Actually, I think it was during Kibaki's time. That's actually, they said, looking at some of the people like this, there were quite a number of musicians, people who played a very big role in art and entertainment industry in this country for so long. They got to be honored, I think, when Kibaki came to power, because, and this is where I give credit to Dr. Alfred Mutua, because actually he played a very big role in identifying some of these people, because musicians were never being honored at all. So that's when people like John Katana started getting people like Head of State Commendation, people like, I think, Susanna Weir, some journalists, people like Philip Ochieng in the media, people like Dorothy Quay. They actually got recognized at that point.
Let's hear from Patrick before we
well, two things. First, on the whole honors thing. I think, actually, ties back to my first point. In the telling of history, we have to be careful that we don't just tell the nice things about our history. That we actually, even when we are branding people Mashujaa, we don't ignore some of the rather unsavory things a lot of them have done. On the issue of honors, for example, let's not forget Kibaki gave his wife an honor.
Which one?
What was it?
Which wife?
Which wife?
Okay, fine.
I am not going to be part into that conversation.
Okay, fine.
And that was, for me, problematic. If these things can be used by whatever government, it's a national honors, to essentially,
which is probably why, Patrick, it should be removed from,
it should be,
the discretion
and I think
there
should be, like, if I'm not wrong, there's a committee of parliament that's supposed to recommend this stuff. The other thing that I was going to say is, in terms of the whole Mashujaa Day experience and stuff, I think it should be more about renewing our vision for the country. What are these things that this Mashujaa stand for? What is that they fought for? The president spoke a bit about the fight against colonialism, and how we should be living under rules that we've made ourselves, which is funny given that his government keeps ignoring these rules. But his also the fact what we really ignore is what the TJRC told us. TJRC says the colonial state was never fundamentally reformed. It stays with us till today. And until we actually start thinking, what is it that we were fighting for? What is it all these people are standing for? And then we can start removing, separating the propaganda the government likes, wants to paint a nice picture of everything, from the reality, and the reality is we still have a very long way to go, and a lot of the things that are being today are actually taking us back as opposed to pushing us forward.
So I think we need to reevaluate then our value systems.
I think
that's what. I think that's where we need to start that conversation. What is our value system? What are our values? Because all these public holidays and national days like the Mashujaa Day, and they've become kind of, they're calendar events, social events, where the upper middle class keep away from them, then they're for the lower middle class.
Go to the Nyayo Stadium.
Go to the Nyayo Stadium and
just to add, especially now that the president is enjoying huge popularity after his return from The Hague, it's at 71%, I believe. He now has that unique opportunity to use that popularity. Perhaps you would differ with how the sampling was done or that sort of thing, but at least he's gotten to that point where people are talking about him. The focus is on him. He has this unique opportunity to use that popularity towards driving the nation in a particular direction. This is who we are as a people. This is what we want to achieve. Perhaps he's doing that. Perhaps he needs to do more. But I think it's something that he has the opportunity now to use. I think that's what anybody who enjoys some huge popularity rating should be able to use that. But I think just our value system, who we are, I'm not sure that we have that. And sometimes we make funny jokes about who we are as Kenyans. I don't always find it funny, because I think it sort of seeps into our mentality.
We tend to kind of worship grief. Kenyans are always united in grief. Leaders were united in grief.
Whenever united any other time.
They're always united in grief. So I think sometimes what brings us together are things like misfortunes, calamities, you know.
That's more.
All right,
So, but I think we need to reevaluate our value system, and just like you said, that huge popularity, as you call it.
Claire, who's your shuja? Quickly.
My kids.
Yvonne?
Oh. Yeah, depending on who's watching.
Yes. Oh, what who's?
No, there's my mother and well,
yeah, there's
that gentleman. Yes, two people, but those two. Yeah.
Patrick?
Well, I named quite a few in an article I put on my blog. I think civil society for me is up there. I think people like Boniface Mwangi. I think the people who write for Brainstorm, the people who back the trend, who refuse to be silenced, to be talked down to by government. Those to me are my shujas. And I think if you go back and you look at the people who have actually driven change for this country, have always been people who have not sort of accepted things as they are or as the government wants them to be told. There are people who've been termed a lot of times as the complainers, the whiners, the bitches, the kvetches, and things. And those to me are my mashuja. And I think it's a tradition that we need to push, that where people learn that you can actually stand up and speak. You don't have to be silenced simply because it's either the unpopular thing to do or government doesn't like what you say.
All right.
Sophia?
My folks, my mom and dad, I was with them on Sunday.
Oh, actually, I should add my wife and kids.
Yeah, she'd be very hurt.
Like, okay, but
be careful where you're going tonight.
But let's go back to a bit of politics and watching what's been happening with the current land situation and disregard of the court orders there. The senators, considering now we are seeing a few of them are divided on the issue, to still go ahead and discuss Makueni governor impeachment or not. I spoke to the CIC chair the other day, and he was saying the thing is that we're actually not looking at what this means down the line. And the media, I think, has that responsibility to paint that picture and create that context. And he gave a very good example. Imagine a situation in a presidential election petition. The loser decides, this court, that's their opinion, this Supreme Court judges. I'm still the president, and starts, making plans of swearing in and all. Are we simply just reporting here in the media that, oh yeah, MPs are involved in this land grab, this and this is happening, and also the disregard of the rule of law, of these court orders, and the president coming out to say judiciary exercise of caution in perhaps exercising your mandate. But are we painting the picture of what does this mean? Can Kenyans as well say, you know what, because Senate has formed a team to consider these orders, to say which ones, they will obey, it's in the papers today, they're considering. So will I and my family have, my dad and mom will be considering what we're doing and not. Are we really painting the picture of the situation we're getting ourselves into, Yvonne?
No. Sadly, those linkages between what's happened in the past, what's happening now, and what it portends for the future is not something we tend to do very well. To go back to what Clay likes to say, we get excited. And so we talk about, this is what's happening now. They're going to discuss, the impeachment of him. And like we said, I think here last week, try and disobey a court order, Sophia, today. Try and disobey that. You will be behind bars so fast, your head will spin. But, for those that are in power, for those that have money, it's something that, quite easily happens. But like I think you rightfully say, this is a really terrible precedent that we're setting, and that anybody else can now do it. And in that regard, we have not done well.
Yeah. Patrick?
I think the media has not taken government to task enough, because in its disregard for of court and by this I mean the executive, I think a lot of this trend is being driven by the initial bit where the executive thinks it can choose which laws it will obey, and then that infects everything else. The president goes, as we said earlier, on Mashuja Day, and says that part of the definition of sovereignty is us living under laws that we ourselves write, But his own government should be bound by those laws. When he goes and blows up a ship in contravention of a court order, he should be taken to task. And it shouldn't be just that, some judge in Mombasa starts grumbling in court that he shouldn't have done this. There should be real consequences. This should be discussed in Parliament. Should be all over our papers. Why is it that government is allowed to do this, to ignore this? It's not the only court order he's ignored. Remember when you had this spate of him being quote unquote misadvised about the powers he has and stuff, and it kept happening, and nobody stands up and says, well, actually here is a huge problem and the presidency has to pay a price for doing it. I think once people start learning that some laws, well, you can get away with ignoring them. As Yvonne said, you're setting a really, really bad precedent for it. Which is why I keep coming back to things like even 143(4) of the Constitution. It's important that we tell the government this Constitution exists to constrain you. That
because
is why it was there. The moment you allow them to pick and choose, then suddenly you will find them picking and choosing in all other areas that you didn't expect.
Claire, how does the media correct this situation?
You see, there's one thing I always say when the government does anything like constitutional or legally, you're innocent until proven guilty. I always say for the government, you're guilty until you prove yourself innocent. In as much as any time the government starts to do something, we need to start assuming that actually this thing the government is doing is wrong, and it has to prove to us that actually it is right. Because that's probably, I think, where we probably go wrong. We don't ask the hard questions or the right questions at the right time. Let's take the example of the land in Karen. I mean, what is so big about this land in Karen that actually the president himself came and cautioned people not to talk about it? Rarely does Mr. Kenyatta come out to talk about 134 acres only. Why is he doing this? Why? We need to ask ourselves, what is so important about this particular one? We have a case, I mean, like there was this story about Lamu, which is it 500,000 acres or something like that? And nobody's making so much noise about it. But for this one, for Mr. Kenyatta and Mr. Ruto to actually come out and caution people about it, what is so big about it? What is the problem, or what is? We need to ask that. We need to ask those questions, and we need to probe further. I mean, I don't know which other people are involved, the people who are involved in all those things. But you see, what is happening is right now there's a story, I think, in today's paper about the so-called buyers. Now they also want to be enjoined in the case between the so-called owners. You see, I mean, this is how they start muddling the whole thing. They start muddling the waters and all that. And for somebody to tell you, okay, fine, this matter is in court, don't talk about it. This matter had been in court. Nobody had talked about it until it was actually broken. Actually, the media broke the news that actually there's a problem here. There's something going on here. And actually here, you have to give it to the people who live around that area.
Because they're the ones who started to raise
the people who, because they saw too much activity. You see, so now this is what we need to ask for. Anytime the government does anything, we have to assume that the government is guilty. It is up to them to prove that they're innocent, because I want to believe.
But here's the other thing, and again with the current land itself, there was a court order in place, so people are still building and stuff. Who's been arrested for violating that court order? Who's in court today?
Yes, so that's what I'm saying. That's
the question that we
for
need
Mr.
to be
Kenyatta to come out and tell people don't talk about it. Because the matter is in court.
Don't talk about it, though?
I mean, there's no point of discussing it. Don't politicize it. But at the same time, there are people actually who are going on with the construction there. How about who is making a bigger mistake?
All right. I think, yes, what we didn't do was question, okay, who are these who are, carrying out the construction, and why aren't they being charged in court? We did make enough noise about it to the point now, the police came in and enforced the court order. But there's something, I think, and you were asking about the solution towards our reportage. Institutional memory, something many of us lack, to be fair. Perhaps I stand accused as well.
That's true.
We lack that institutional memory to remember the Koech report, to remember, wait, there was a time the president there was a time that, and then join the dots and paint the picture. It could be that we're all very young people in the newsroom, born in the 80s. That's fine. But we're not the only ones. We also have other people that were born 70s, 60s, 50s, perhaps the 40s. But I think just generally as journalists, we do lack that institutional memory. So for us, we report Karen as Karen. Something has happened here, this is big. We don't then make those linkages with everything that's happened. That's not to say though that the Standard on Sunday, the front page, I think it was Standard on Sunday, just talked about, you know, land and all the bloody deals surrounding it, what happened in Lamu in the past. Yes. But I think that's a little bit of what we should be able to do in a 2.5-minute piece. Like, this is what's happening here, but wait, there was this and there was this and there was this. And then again, like what you were saying before, with the issue of court.
I work for Standard on Sunday.
Yes, oh yeah.
Okay.
Well done. But, you know, it's just about painting that picture and what the consequences are. I still do think to a great extent we report about events as they happen, and then that makes us no different from the ordinary Mwananchi who's also experiencing the events as they happen
and tweeting
about it.
It's all, I mean, it's I don't know what I can add to that, because it's what I've been saying for a long time. You know, the coverage is very episodic. You know, things spring out of the ether and disappear into the ether, you know. And if, just say, it doesn't take much, you know, for us to sit back and think that, you know, when we're reporting on something, it's not just a he said, she said thing. There is a context around it, you know. That's why people go and do research, go and read up on things, you know what it is that you're talking about. You know, what is the history to these things? You know, so if that became a feature of our reporting, you know, that when you switch on news, it's Mashujaa Day, President said this, but here's a context to it.
Can I just add something?
That would be fantastic.
How much, as media houses, do we invest in research teams? Just a thought. Because all of this great journalism that we see from people abroad, Christian Amanpour is not Christian Amanpour because she has all that information in her head. But there's a team that supplies it so that for that particular moment, she's then as knowledgeable as she can be on the subject. Because no one person, to be fair, can know everything about everything. But how much do we invest in that? We invest a lot at the risk of, hopefully I won't get shot when I go upstairs, but we invest a lot in this.
It looks like.
It looks good. We invest a lot in this. We don't invest in research teams.
We've talked about this before. We've talked about this before, lack of institutional memory. And also, even apart from probably that kind of investment, there's also a lot of movement in our newsrooms. Because I keep on giving this example. You'll find that there's somebody who covered the Watergate scandal is still in the same newsroom where he was, okay? But the person who actually covered the 2010 Constitution in Kenya is no longer in the newsroom.
But you see, if you had the research team, it wouldn't matter who's going where. That remains a mainstream media.
But you see, also what happens is, we tend to do all these stories, but I mean, yes, the person is out of the newsroom, but sometimes it would be better if you could probably call back this person, because I remember even when they were discussing, probably these guys were talking about impeaching Obama the other time, they called those people, the journalists who covered the impeachment of Nixon. You know, how was it and all that? I mean, give us a perspective, give us a perspective of that time, how it happened. So we also, when yes, we don't invest so much as in, like, let me say, in resources or in equipment or, I mean, such kind of archiving system and stuff. But also, because of lack of institutional memory, we tend to forget, like, oh, you know, there's somebody who covered this thing maybe in 1969, or maybe who covered this thing in 2010. Let's call this person back and to give us a perspective. I think that's also one of the problems that we have. We do not go back. So for us, everything, it is new at that moment. And I'll give you the example I always give in the newsroom is when so-called lifestyle writers write a story and tell me something like, drinking coffee is an emerging trend in Nairobi. I mean, I tell them, what do you mean? Just what do you mean drinking coffee is an emerging trend? Oh, going to the movies is an emerging trend in Nairobi. Just
no, it's not.
See, so that is what they never go back. They never. The people I know who actually have worked in some newsrooms for 2 or 3 years, they don't know where the library is.
Okay, we need to bring this to a close, but very quickly, I think with Pat Peterson of CBN, is it CBN?
Yes. The 700 Club.
700 Club. You know, it's now everyone must be very careful what you say wherever it is in the world.
KOT to the rescue.
KOT to the rescue, because even with coverage, especially when there's breaking news and you'll find everybody's live and talking about something, I found that after that you'll hear very many comments about a certain reporter said this, how can this one say this? So, but I guess the two maybe cannot quite be put together. But what did you think about what he said?
Well, I mean, Pat Robertson, I think, has been a nutter for a while. He's one of those. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those extreme right-wing Christian sort of chappies, So the first time he's getting into trouble with his comments, he does tend to be quite ignorant, and things. My issue here, and this goes back to the entire Ebola debate, is how quickly things can get turned around. Rwanda now is screening people coming from the US.
Spain. Yes, and yes, that's right.
Now, when you think about the utility of that, is it just a political statement they're making, or do they really believe that a guy from states pose a risk? Perhaps it's just a reaction, but it's a reaction to a debate that's going on in the US about stopping flights from this place called Africa, because it's all one place and all of them have Ebola, stuff. I also think within countries, and this goes back to discussions we've had here before about, for example, the flights to West Africa and things, and I was one of the ones who said, well, actually we should stop it. But going back and looking at what was said and put out by the WHO, perhaps that's not a stand we should have taken. In fact, I believe Sierra Leone said they're going to be reviewing their ties with us, because of that stand. So perhaps we need to revisit this and think about it a bit more. Although I will put a proviso to it. It has been demonstrated that people with Ebola can get on planes, not showing symptoms, land in places, and go and get sick later, and transmit it. I think the question should be, if somebody comes in through our airport that way, are we able to cope with that risk? Nigeria contained AIDS quite quickly and quite effectively. Are we able to have somebody come in, go through JKIA, end up somewhere in Lodwar, get sick? What would happen in that thing? And it's good to see. I mean, I rarely give government kudos, but it's good to see that at least some things are being done in terms of educating.
After we made
when you were not here,
actually the microbiologist in the house.
But it's good to see them. I mean, I think they could do more, but it's good to see them at least putting it out there. I've been looking. I hear there is a contingency plan in case of Ebola. I haven't seen it, but it would be great to see that.
Let's talk about that plan for a moment, because we're building an isolation unit. Which
2
then
months
for me,
later, 2 months after.
2 months after, and then it'll be ready by the end of this month. The question I ask is, what happens if we get a case between now and then?
Well, they've got a temporary one.
Money. Yes, but we spent a lot of money constructing.
But also,
that.
have
we talked about and have we talked about the doctors? Are they being trained right now? Are they being given the right equipment?
They've gone to West Africa to learn.
KMPDU is saying, bring us in. Let's be part of this conversation, because you cannot be building an isolation center, but the people who will work in that, aren't as equipped as they need to be. Let me just talk very quickly about Pat Robertson. What shocked me was the lady who was interviewing him. She sat there like nothing was wrong. I don't know. For him,
network.
Like he constantly says that.
Are you saying
but the
that
lady
Christian
had this
shouldn't know
very
about
blank
these
look on her face.
It's his
when
show.
He said all
It's
of these
his
things.
network.
Yeah, and she's been with him on that show for centuries. But I could not believe her reaction. Towels, AIDS, and she just something about that just struck me as odd. But I think out of everything else, I'm not really shocked by what Pat Robertson said.
But have you
because
seen?
he says that.
Now going back to the Ebola thing, have you actually seen a copy of the contingency plan?
Those are the
I haven't
questions
seen
we
it.
should be, yes.
You look for it on the web, it's not there. And my question is, shouldn't this be a public document?
Yes, it should indeed.
You know,
and here's another thing we're not reporting about the Ebola virus. We're not talking about the economic impact it's having. We're getting into, these are the symptoms, this is what's happening, this is what we're doing. But we're not taking a look at what's happening in West Africa. What's that situation going to be like? The World Bank is now raising issues. The manpower is being lost. West Africa, remember, produces collectively about 40% of the world's cocoa.
Right now, actually,
that's
chocolate
used to
in
make
the
chocolate. You know, I think we need to make those. Thankfully, not for me. Yeah, not a fan either.
Oh, really? It's that bad, my dear.
Things are thick, Clay.
Anyway.
But you see, it's about, and like I said, just painting that bigger picture. Because right now it's all Ebola this, Ebola that, Ebola this, which is great. However, how is this going to affect the economies of West Africa, of Sierra Leone,
and trickle down,
and you know, trickle down
but you see,
to other African nations?
But you see the kind of reaction, you see in is it Rwanda or Rwanda? It's laughable.
Is it though?
Of course, yes, it's laughable.
Why not?
You have a country.
From the
just
US?
a minute. What was the joke yesterday that Kim Kardashian has married more people than the number of Americans who died from Ebola? You have 2,000, 3,000 people dying in your continent, and you're actually screening people from a country who have lost.
And also, when you think about it,
they have lost 2 people. I think one person. And the rest actually have been more or less. Can I? Do you call it cured? In microbiome?
2 are cured.
2 are cured.
Well,
and one died. And the one who died came from your
West
continent.
Africa,
You know. So now, what? It's laughable.
And here's what we're talking about.
What
You
Rwanda
see,
is trying to do,
and even with the AU starting to say, okay, we should send doctors and we should set aside some funds. When did that happen? During the East African Business Summit? How long was that? And yet it originated here. So the AU continues to say, oh, you know, we are sovereign. But when it comes to an issue like Ebola, how sovereign are we when it comes to that? We
I
only
think
start to do something about
Onyangobo
it
had a very nice article on that and on the reaction to Ebola by the African countries. They were saying they shouldn't really get a free ride, you know, from this. There should be a point at which we look at why is it that they're not investing in their own health systems. Ebola, when it's gone outside, it's gone to Spain and to the US and places like that, it's been quite quickly contained.
Yes.
It's an easily containable.
And you know what's going to happen? They're going to study it, then they make the medicine, then they'll sell it to you.
No, but my point is this.
Even in terms of containing the disease here.
But my point is this: the things, the procedures required to contain Ebola are actually not that big, you know. Aside from dealing with the suits and stuff that you need to when you're dealing with the guy, the basics of washing your hands, of having clean facilities, of having whatever containment units, these are basics of medicine.
Which is the same thing that
the question should be, why is it that we don't even have the basics, here? And that's my problem. Is I think I read an article sometime back in the Star about why are we waiting for Ebola to start thinking about these issues. There was a report put out that was reported on by the Standard by the government that looks at the quality of training we have of doctors, and says, for example, most of our doctors don't know how to use. A third of our hospitals rather don't have procedures for dealing with hazardous waste. They don't have procedures for dealing with. A lot of our personnel don't know how to deal with sharps, injections, needles, and stuff. If those are the people we have there, then we are breeding. If Ebola comes in, then we already have set the scene for it to move. But these are things that we could easily solve. We know the problems are there. Let's fix those. Don't wait for Ebola to turn up.
And is it shocking that also the conversation around Ebola is taking a racial dimension? That first, the man who died in the States was black. There was a cure for those who, the first 2, and the other one has been they're managing that. But also here, and the tone of, conversation when they talk about, don't have flights to Africa at all, or most of these African countries, at least in the West. Does that shock you that now we can still have that conversation quickly?
I think there was this story that people were trying to peddle in the media that only the whites survive Ebola, the blacks die. Come on, Uganda had Ebola, I think, the last time there was this epidemic. The people who survived in Uganda, I think. Yeah,
I think the discussion on racism was particularly in the United States and how it was dealt with there. Particularly with Duncan, because they said he went to the hospital, he was sent back home. And, you know, the hospital itself apologized for the way they handled his case.
But
just to answer the question, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, while you're saying that, actually the hospital in, I mean, you see, back at his home in Liberia, they wanted to prosecute him. Actually, had he come back, had he gotten cured and come back, they were going to prosecute him.
Yeah, they're saying that he did it on purpose.
So I think it beats logic. Like whatever this Kagame is doing, he's believing his own hype. I mean, that is, there's nothing. I think there's so much hype that has been built about him, and now he started getting into his head.
You know,
because
let's also be careful how we report that. He's not
yeah.
banned flights from the US. People from the US are just being screened, which...
I don't refuse. Everybody should be screened. Everybody should be screened.
But they're coming
and
from
actually,
a target
I think
nation.
they get more people from African countries than they get from the US. Anything.
Okay.
Yeah. And apart from that, also like the US guys who've been saying like ban flights from West Africa. Actually, they're not direct flights from the US to most of West African countries. They're not there. You see. So it's all about. Sometimes politicians are ignorant on both sides. You know. Like the Pat Robinson, it's called Pat what?
Roberts.
Oh, Robert something, whatever it is. Yeah, that's Pat
Robinson. Okay,
but I mean,
I don't watch him. I mean,
just very quickly on the survivors of Ebola, there's been quite a number of them even in West Africa itself. I think MSF was yesterday they were tweeting about 1,000 survivors. The important thing about these survivors is they get immunity, at least from the particular strain that they got. You know, and a lot of them have been helping out the people taking care of the people who were sick and things. And then also there is the issue of the antibodies they have, which we saw in the case in Spain, where the part of the treatment was a woman was transfused with blood from somebody who survived Ebola. So they are also a resource, I think, for the people who are sick. You know, if we could get in the systems that that could help, essentially move around their blood as part of a treatment regime.
Let's end
you're supposed to tell us how Ebola started, because most of us don't.
Do we have time?
Not now.
Next time we'll start doing our session.
This Pat Robertson guy, is there that 700 club of his? Is there a local channel that airs it? I think that's what we need to go for that, because that's just not, his apology is not enough. We need to tell these guys to yank him off the air.
Yank him off the air. Okay, had it from there. Let's end with Pistorius. And yesterday the sentencing finally coming out. But in terms of the coverage of that, of course, it's a story that grabbed the attention of the world. Everybody was watching and following, and that there was a channel on DSTV specifically towards that coverage, analysis, reporting on what's happening. Interesting direction we are taking. Let me start with Yvonne. In terms of coverage, that perhaps we need a station for the Parliament, National Assembly. Anyway,
hopefully when we get to
for the greed.
Digital, if we do. Everybody said it was the O.J. Simpson, of Africa and of this century, and in how it was covered. I think there's a lot of people who made their careers. There's a certain law professor or law lecturer in South Africa called Kelly Phelps, who's on CNN half the time and has been interviewed by just about every other media house on that. But, you know, the reporting got to a point, remember the judge actually stopped people from tweeting from inside the courtroom because it got to a point where, you know, a lot of the tweets that were going out were not exactly accurate.
The tweet hit the fan,
That's an interesting way of putting it. That's a very interesting way of putting it. But I think it's gotten to that level. I like that it was a big focus. And remember, South Africa seems to be in the eye of the storm because now they have the honeymoon killer. Shrin Dewani, the guy, the rich Briton Asian who went there and then, allegedly got his girlfriend killed. The guy who killed
supposedly helped him,
died in jail, but he died of a brain tumor. Yeah. So that was a problem he'd had for a while. But then it's just starting to get to that point where we need this sort of...
that case was also going to be live,
Yes, it is. Just having the right experts to it. And I think it shows that reportage in Africa on certain issues, has gone a long way. I think,
I'm not sure that it shows that the reportage has gone, or reportage has gone a long way.
You don't think so? Watched it. I was impressed.
I think it's again, it's more sensationalism. Yes, and I know it's Olympic star, beautiful model.
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day murder.
Again, I think it was in Mail and Guardian, the South African paper that has an article on this, and it talks about, you've got 17,000 murders in Johannesburg. I think
surely you can't cover all.
Yeah. Why this one? There's very many more others, and this is the thing: is I would think that these sorts of cases should be a window into a wider story, but that doesn't happen.
Of course,
it's a window to wider story.
Which is why you focus on it, because it is the window.
Yeah,
exactly.
but that's the problem. But the problem
everything.
is we just stick with the window.
What, so we don't open the window?
We don't get it. So we just stick in.
But the window it has
so
opened.
it's all about Pistorius and will he be jailed? Now he's gotten 5 years. Will he run again?
I think sometimes before you come also you have to look at the background of all this. Like South Africa has a history.
Yes.
I mean, this was white crime,
discussed,
and this guy had all this disability and all that. So there's some other aspects. There's some other aspects also that you have to look at.
And I think it did bring out the issue of home invasions in South Africa, because that is something that has become quite rampant. And he was not the first
when this thing happened, first of all,
to have done this.
When this thing happened, first of all, the family, I think his family, the first people they blamed the black government. They said that their son keeps all these guns because the black government cannot provide security. You see, so there's a history to all these things sometimes.
Yeah, and that's the history.
There's the entertainment
so
part of news. But
want it how from now?
What I would love is that history, that context, to be discussed. And in fact, the fact that we in Kenya are so engrossed in this, would be nice for us to start asking, well, what's happening with murders in our own country, stuff.
Oh, but we do that. We do that in case files, don't we?
Yes.
Okay. Our time is up. There you go. Dennis Onsari will continue to that plug. Thank you. We're leading with that. Thank you, guys. That was great. Patrick Gathara, communications consultant, Yvonne Okwara, head of anchors here at KTN, and Claire Magunda, who's features editor at The Standard, which carried the issue of land.
The ad in the paper. Yeah? The ad in the paper tomorrow.
Yeah, you're in the paper. Yeah, there's this, following this precedent that has been set by Nandi County.
And it would be free for us.
Tomorrow, Clay organized this. I think on Sunday would be better. There's more
readership.
People reading.
Okay,
so
fine.
let's have an appreciation
I'll talk to the
three of you
upstairs
for being part of the show. And your words during this segment. Your support of the show, just being here today. Had you not come, I don't know what I would have said. Thank you for coming, and thank you for watching. Stay with us, because when we return on our lifestyle segment today, we're focusing on personal branding. How do you build that brand? We're coming back shortly.